I spent days trying to figure out what makes Keeps on Falling such an amazing song to listen to, and I finally figured it out. It's the perfect blend of classic R&B with a modern twist, and in this video we're making a beat similar to that. 90s R&B is probably never coming back, but boy do we love ourselves some good callbacks and some good throwbacks. And who better than the legendary R&B producer Babyface to team up with Demille and LMA's beautiful mezzo-soprano voice for the song Keeps on Falling. Now for this song, Babyface and Demille sampled Tevin Campbell's Can We Talk, which happens to be a song that Babyface himself produced. But what they did to turn this into the perfect LMA song is something so simple that it'll blow your mind. So let's talk about the specific chord techniques that you can use to create that classic 90s R&B sound for yourself. Now what we know about 90s R&B chord progressions is that usually they sound very dreamy and they're filled with a lot of emotion, and that is a lot, in part due to the sounds that they used back then, but also due to the techniques that they've been using. And I'm gonna just break down a couple of techniques that you can use as well. So there are 3 chords which form the basis of my chord progression: a G sharp major 7 chord, a G minor 7 chord, and a C major 7 chord in its first and its second inversion. Now there's something a little funky about that C major 7 chord, and that brings us to the first technique that I use. See, when writing in the major scale, this song was written in the major scale by the way, we know that the 6th degree always leads to a minor chord. I decided to take a couple liberties. I decided to see what would happen if I would play a 6th degree in my chord progression but turn that into a major chord instead. So that's why I'm rocking with a C major 7 chord, which has a very cool cadence, more on that later, as compared to a C minor 7 chord. Now the cadence is actually the most important technique that I'm using in this chord progression, but in my videos I often refer to it as the ending stretch or coming home. And if you don't know what a cadence is, don't worry, the plugs got you covered. A cadence is actually a very characteristic way to end your musical phrase. It really gives the listener the feeling that the phrase has ended and that we're about to start anew with the same musical phrase, of course. It's a cool way to add some well-needed character to your R&B beats, and that's what I've been doing. You can see me use a C major 7 chord going into an F7 sus4 chord, and later in the chord progression you can see me go from a C major 7 chord to an F9 sus4 chord, ending on a G sharp diminished 7 chord, which is classic R&B filled with tension and definitely something that you should explore in your beats as well. People often compare the use of a cadence in music to proper punctuation in a sentence. And while we're on the subject of those cool chords that I mentioned, F7, sus4 and diminished and stuff like that, please delve into passing chords, diminished chords and all that. That's essential to really getting a classic 90s R&B feel for your beats. So this is the drum beat that I came up with, which I think sounds close to Keeps on Falling. But first, let me ask y'all a question. Have y'all listened to LMA songs? Because if you have, you'll probably agree with this statement. LMA and her producers are a fan of one specific drum groove which you can hear in a lot of her songs. I'm not gonna break down her entire discography, at least not in this video, but from her debut EP Time until her most recent release, even the deluxe edition of Heart on My Sleeve, you can hear this drum groove occurring a lot. Now of course there are variations of this drum groove, but they all have similar ingredients: hard kicks, snaps or claps, perk from an 808 kit, and a dope 808 bass. Now the main culprit for this one I think is DJ Mustard, who is one of LMA's closest and earliest collaborators and perhaps the curator of her entire sound ever since that she came to prominence. So when it comes to the drums that I've used, I've tried to go for a similar groove. DJ Mustard back in the day used to call it ratchet music. Those are his words, not mine, but I still feel that what I have is very close in terms of vibe to Keeps on Falling. So the chords and the drums were in place, and this is kind of where I started to lose my confidence, which is weird because everything seemed to look like I was on my way to producing a banger, but I was getting very caught up on deciding which sounds that I wanted to use in the beat. But first, let's take a detour. Let's talk about the sounds that I'm hearing in Keeps on Falling, and this is not counting the last hook and the bridge, of course. The main thing that you're hearing throughout the entire song is a gated pad, and that is supplemented by a couple of filtered keys which are playing the original chord progression from Tevin Campbell's Can We Talk. You hear it filtered in the verses, but as soon as the hook starts, the filter gets taken off. You're also hearing oohs and ahs, which are probably just sung by LMA and then processed by her engineer, but what you're also hearing is a little riff or a little lick being played by high-pitched keys, but I'm actually kind of convinced that it's a bell pad. So what did I do as soon as I got stuck? And I got frustrated, but I decided to close the project. I decided to take a break, let it simmer for a little bit, but boy, once I came back, I made some magic. I'm rocking with 6 instances of the Korg M1, which is the VST that was up to the task of creating a classic 90s R&B soundscape. I'm also supplementing that with 2 instances of Sonology by Roland, and I've got Sublab XL for a custom-made 808 bass. So let's talk about the sounds in the Korg M1 that I used. Now the first thing that I used was my bass layer, which is a classic, dreamy, vibey 90s R&B electric piano, which I then supplemented with a classic glassy acoustic piano. On top of that, I've got some strings playing from a patch, which is probably from a string machine, but I've also got a couple of sitar accent notes just playing, which I think really adds a cool vibe to the beat. But what I've also got is an arpeggiated harp, which I really think adds some cool movement to the beat. You know, it's something that you're also hearing in Keeps on Falling, and of course I've got a gated pad of my own. When it comes to Sonology, I'm just rocking with 2 leads, one which I'm introducing after the first hook and one which I'm introducing in the second hook. Now this is already sounding like a complete beat, and in my opinion very close to the vibe of Keeps on Falling and very close to, you know, a 90s R&B vibe in terms of basses. But there is one thing that I could have done, which the original song, both Tevin Campbell and an LMA song does, and that is to introduce a bridge. Now if you listen to pop music, and I'm sure you do, you'll notice that the bridge is usually introduced right after the second hook, but some people like to introduce the bridge right after the second verse as kind of an extension before building up to the second hook. Whatever you do, you gotta make sure that your build up to that last hook is on point, because that's gonna be the climax of your song. And beautiful folks, that brings us to the end of this video and my breakdown of my attempt to make a beat that sounds similar to Keeps on Falling. Now me personally, I keeps on falling in love with that song because it's a masterclass in how to combine classic 90s R&B, you know, give it a modern twist, especially with Babyface, a legend, Demille, a heavyweight of a producer, LMA's amazing voice. It was peak R&B to me. Now beautiful people, I hope you enjoyed this beat and this breakdown, and I hope to see y'all in the next video. But for the people that want to consume some more content, I waged a couple of attempts at making some 90s R&B, which are videos that you can check out here. But if it's theory you're looking for, I've also got you covered. And whatever your choice is, I hope to see y'all in the next video. Y'all be easy. Peace.